Now back to Inside Real Estate. Here's Mike the Realtor.
Hey folks, Mike Kruizinga here. We're back. Inside Real Estate Radio, website InsideRealEstateRadio.com. Crazy show for you today. We've been talking Super Bowl Sunday instead of our usual format of real estate and home improvement. But we're switching gears, flipping the switch, going serious on you. It's a political year, election year, so we've in a rolling series of political segments we're doing. It's time to head into that. On the line here, we've got Paul Brown, who is the Republican candidate running in District 32. He's running against the incumbent Pete Sessions. And Pete Sessions has been in since about 96, by the way. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, term limits, and we talk about it all the time. We need to make that happen. And, you know, if you're in there for 10 or so years, I'm saying it's time for you to get out, because how effective can you be by that point? Paul Brown, are you on the line with us?
Yes, sir. I'm right here. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. How we doing on a Super Bowl Sunday?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm taking a little day off. I've been walking door to door pretty much nonstop for a while now, so I've personally visited about 9,200 houses in the district, and it's nice to have a day off every once in a while.
Yeah, I believe it. Well, you're out there hitting the pavement, aren't you?
That's right. That's right.
Those incumbents don't do that anymore, do they?
Yeah, you rarely get to see your own representative. That's true across the country. It's certainly true here in District 32.
Yeah, they start to hide out for a while once they're in, because, you know, I think it's a thing about, for the voters, you know, name recognition just starts to become part of it. And once you kind of recognize that name, you're like, oh, yeah, well, I didn't hear a scandal about them this last go-around. We'll just vote for them again. I mean, isn't that kind of true?
Yeah, you do see that a lot. And to be honest, one of the challenges we knew coming into this race is going to be going against someone with so much name recognition. But I was pleasantly surprised to find that I think this is the election cycle where people in the district have decided, you know what, 20 years is too long. It's time for somebody new. And that's the kind of feedback I've been getting throughout the campaign.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think everybody kind of feels that way. Is everybody's kind of fed up with everybody. And if you've been in there that long, unless you really accomplished some things, and don't get me wrong, a lot of these incumbents have certainly accomplished things, but, you know, we're talking about real life-changing impacts on the ground for people.
Right.
And by and large, that stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah, you're right. And, I mean, we do get impacts, but they're largely negative. One of the things I talk about a lot is the national debt. It's creeping up on $20 trillion, and it's, you know, our Congress is responsible for that. People like to point fingers across the aisle, but it's Republicans and Democrats. And my position is we need new people in the Republican Party who are very serious about fiscal responsibility, who can really work on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, anybody who knows anything is it's, you know, he who is in a position of debt is in a position of weakness. And, you know, militarily speaking, you know, we're the big kid on the block, but financially speaking, yeah, not so much, and that impacts that.
You're absolutely right. You know, I'd like to talk to you all a little bit about my background, where I'm coming from, and everything. I'm sure some of the people listening to this know this already, but I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I worked in intelligence, went to Iraq. You know, I've started a couple small businesses. I've never run for office before, but I'm running now because, you know, as we've been discussing, it's very clear that we need to make some big changes in Washington. So I'm definitely aiming to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We need to hear about your background. And I was extremely interested to hear about your intelligence background, and if you can maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, on where you can, and
Sure.
then and how it relates to you know, this topic in the world where we're heavily relying on electronic surveillance, which obviously is great. We need it. But at the same time, we're losing human intelligence and losing sort of the game on the ground to a degree where we need that human intelligence, and it's tough to replace that solid human intelligence on the ground.
You're absolutely right. So a little more on my background. I joined the Marine Corps in 2005. I was honorably discharged in 2010 as a sergeant. In that time, I was working in intelligence and what's known as signals intelligence as a cryptological Spanish linguist.
Okay.
When I deployed to Iraq, I was working in a capacity as a geospatial intelligence analyst. And, my major function during this time was writing reports, the various kinds of reports that are used for targeting insurgents and insurgent cells. So that was definitely very interesting work. It was very rewarding work. When I got out of the Marine Corps in 2010, I got married. That was, kind of one of my thought processes on getting out. I wanted to sort of start a family and kind of move on from that. But I ended up going to work at the Defense Intelligence Agency for close to 4 more years and continued report writing and everything. And, in the nearly 10 years I spent in the intelligence community, I learned a lot about our capabilities, about the way our intelligence system works, about our shortfalls. And you're absolutely right. We do have a big gap in human intelligence. And the electronic surveillance you're talking about is an extremely powerful and useful tool. However, it does have its limits, and it does have, another total different set of issues that we see a lot on the news, which is the issue of, the Fourth Amendment privacy rights for U.S. citizens. I was on another show the other day, and I was being asked about, don't we need to have the tools we need to catch terrorists? And the answer is yes, with the exception of when we are illegally violating the rights of U.S. citizens. As someone who has worked in that community, I know that we don't need to be able to illegally violate the privacy of U.S. citizens. We can get warrants when we do suspect a U.S. citizen of that kind of activity. If we need to take a closer look, we can get a warrant.
Right.
And this is something that people don't talk about too much when they're trying to push the position of we need more security. But I like to remind people of what Benjamin Franklin said. Those who would trade essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither. And I'll ad lib here onto that and say they'll get neither, because unfortunately, the more liberty you give up, the less your security actually exists, because you're handing over your liberty to a tyrannical state.
Exactly, and I agree wholeheartedly, 100%, because it's usually just a matter of time before that happens. Once you give up for the sake of security, give up your liberties.
That's right.
It's hard to get them back, number one, and number two, you're not far off from going very, very south.
Yep, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think, you raise a great point. Obviously, we're extremely concerned about the electronic surveillance as it relates to us domestically. But on the flip side of that, abroad, it has scored us some huge wins. But many times it needs to be verified on the ground, either through our own intelligence assets or our military assets. And so that's where we need to not forget about continuing to develop on the ground as well. Right.
You just can't always rely on technology. Technology is fantastic. It's a force multiplier. It's, the better technology we have, the better job we can do. But it's never a replacement for things like human intelligence. Better technology is never a replacement for, having the right people in your infantry and in your special operations. Any company knows that you can have the best software, the best tools available in your market, but if you don't have the right people working them, it doesn't matter. And human intelligence is something that atrophied significantly throughout the 1990s.
Right.
In many ways, we've worked since then to build it back up. But frankly, our intelligence services are working on a pretty limited budget for the task at hand. And one of the things you'll hear me talk about is cutting spending. We've got to cut spending federally, but one of the areas that you get the biggest positive returns for your money, at least in the area of national security or national defense, is intelligence, because it is a force multiplier. The more the better intelligence you have, the less you're going to have to spend elsewhere later down the line on hopefully on wars, on conflicts, on racing with the enemy, because you know where the enemy's at. You can pinpoint the best tools and strategies you need to counter them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think that's one of the reasons why, to me, you're such a interesting candidate in this race, and how you're kind of uniquely qualified in this particular era. You've got the skill sets that honestly we really need in someone who is willing to actually go to Congress, And, some people are like, go to Congress, you're just going to bat your head against the wall. But it takes a particular type of person to say, hey, I'm willing to do that. And then for that same person to have the same kind of skill sets that you do and knowledge that you do, particularly in an extremely important area, intelligence, that kind of excites me about your candidacy.
Certainly, I definitely appreciate that observation. And I'll say one thing from my perspective. One of the things I bring to the table is experience on the ground in this most recent major conflict in the global war on terror. Not only did I deploy to Iraq, my brother was also in the Marine Corps. He went to Iraq and Afghanistan. I have cousins in the Army and Navy that went to Afghanistan. And, I've got tons of other friends and family that have served, and many of which who have deployed. And we've all I've consistently run into the same perspective amongst other servicemen and women and other veterans. I'm not saying I speak for everyone here, but a very large portion of us are frustrated by the fact that we get sent to these conflicts, but our elected officials do not commit to winning. And this is not a new problem. This has been a problem for 70 years.
Right.
Our servicemen in Korea saw it. We saw it in Vietnam. We saw it in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's come to the point where we have repeated ourselves so much and under such major circumstances that I have no reason to believe that in the near future we're going to do anything differently. And so as we draw closer to the problem of Syria, it's very clear that there's a possibility that we're going to ramp up into that conflict as well. My position has become that, look, unless we're willing to do literally whatever it would take to win in this situation, as i.e. commit to winning, which would essentially be total war, then I know we're not going to. And as such, I can't support any plus up of troops in Syria. And furthermore, right now my position is that we need to cast a vote for the troops that are in Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Yemen now, because the last authorization for use of military force was passed in 2003. And at this point, they're all there operating solely at the whim of the president without any acknowledgement or responsibility from Congress. I would vote to bring them home, but one way or the other, whether they're there or they're at home, it needs to be Congress that decides it, because frankly, the way we're operating now is completely unconstitutional.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think your frustration as someone who has served is, mirrors the frustration of the average, American all across the country who is tired of seeing our country commit to operations overseas, but not commit to taking care of them in the right way, providing the necessary assets, necessary funding, all the capabilities that we need to get the job done and then get it over with. They kind of just do sort of a halfway job. And, your frustration, our frustration, it's all the same. And I think everybody's kind of tired of it.
You're absolutely right. People are tired of it. People are waking up to the fact that we need to do something different. And I'm definitely in the market for doing something different as well. That's why I'm running.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, look, geopolitics in the Mideast is super complicated. A few decades ago we backed somebody. Another decade, goes by. We may not back them at that time. It's very complicated as far as what we do geopolitically in the Middle East, and most people don't understand it. And then getting into the conflicts constantly. Syria gets very scary. We need someone who understands what's going on and who has been over there, and that's why I really like what your candidacy is about. And by the way, if people want to get more information about you, you've done a number of radio interviews. I think you were on K-Sky, 660 AM, our competitor as well with Mark Davis, right?
That's right. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways people can find out more. The biggest thing is the website, paulbrowntx.com. On that website, you'll find several of the interviews I've done, as well as plenty of other information on me. I intend to put this one up there as well if I get an audio file for that.
Yes, we'll get it to you.
The Facebook page is it's facebook.com/paulbrowntx. But I definitely encourage people to look at these. They've got especially the website. It's got my issues. It's got more of my bio. There's a contact form on there where people can reach out to me, and I personally check those and I'm very happy to really discuss anything with people. But this is a very important race, and I think one of our biggest
we're running about really short. I'm sorry, I got to cut you off, Paul.
Sure.
This has been a good conversation. We need more time. I'm absolutely game for having another conversation on another week because I think we got way more to talk about. Hey, we've been talking to Paul Brown, candidate in District 32. Folks, check the website if you didn't get all of it